wrestling fans, and welcome to another edition of John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight podcast, the only wrestling podcast that brings you back 30 years with vintage audio featuring some of the biggest names of that time. And this episode is not going to be an exception. The Pro Wrestling Spotlight covered all the news stories and breaking developments in real time. And now we relive those moments right here on the podcast. Joining me, as always, the renowned pro wrestling journalist, the former managing editor of Pro Wrestling Illustrated and so many other wonderful newsstand magazines back in the day. And this week, celebrating a birthday, let's bring on Bob Smith. Bob, happy birthday to you, my friend.
Thank you. I looked at the calendar. It said today you are officially old. So I've reached it. Like I say, I'm so old that my Just for Men lasts just an hour.
That's old, Bob.
That's old. That is old. The doctor wanted to find out how old I was, so he screwed off my leg and counted the rings. Boom, boom. I got 1 million of them. I'll be here all week. Please check your business.
You do anything special for your birthday this week? What'd you do?
I was just surrounded by great people. That was basically it. I had a nice cake made for me. Thank you, Helena.
Nice.
They announced me I was bowling last night, and I got announced at the bowling alley. They announced it to the entire house. Happy birthday to Bob Smith. I couldn't believe it. So
that's always good for free drinks too, isn't it?
Yeah, damn Skippy it was. Yeah, absolutely. And here's the beauty part about the bowling. It amazes me how many of the bowlers are wrestling fans. Yes, there's a fellow who just last night was kegling, and I noticed he was wearing the brand new anniversary DX shirt from when the WWE was at the Barclays. Yeah. So it amazes me how many bowlers are wrestling fans. So when I tell them that I'm doing this podcast, person after person says, I heard the podcast. I really enjoyed it. So it's kind of cool to get the actual walk up to you gratification, for this show, which it's rare because, our audience is faceless. We can't see them. We can't hear them. But I have the luxury of actually seeing people and hearing them react to what you and I do. So it's a lot of fun in that regard.
Well, absolutely. And, what a tie-in, going back 30 years when we were just about 30 years ago starting the Wrestling Bowling League at the Farmingdale Lanes and the Comac Lanes.
Yeah, I was going over the notes for the show, and I noticed Farmingdale Lanes once again mentioned.
Yeah, they were sponsoring now, and we were bringing wrestlers to them, and we started this Saturday morning or after the show. We did a bowling league once a week. It was kind of fun.
That's great. Was it worth the while of the bowling lanes to get involved with the wrestlers?
Yeah, they did. And, when we brought Davey Boy Smith and Jim Neidhart in, it was a massive crowd. And, it was just, it was great. And it was kind of sponsored. They had a bowling organization. The guy that owned Farmingdale Lanes also owned Comac Lanes, and he was the head of the association. So he found it something really cool, a cool promotion for them to do.
Yeah, that probably brought in people.
Yeah,
for some reason it works. The wrestling and the bowling works. I can't put my finger on it, but it's a similar audience, and that must have been a lot of fun to run things at Farmingdale Lanes, which was a nice place in its day. That was a beautiful.
Yes, it was. And Comac Lanes was a nice lane. They were nice lanes too. So yeah, it was a good period, and things were getting a little bit more optimistic for the show. But we'll talk about that as we go over it. But first of all, we're going to bring on our producer and our creative director, Mr. Marsh. Marsh, are you there with us today?
Hey, you.
You're in the background, but how are you today?
I'm doing good. It's been a busy day.
Yeah, you're getting more and more busy. You got a lot of activity going on. You're being creative in everything you do. You're editing this show. You're pulling clips. You're doing social media videos. So we appreciate you, and we got another good one today, Marsh.
Yeah. I actually thought it was really cool when I realized that this was the second meet and greet you had done in a row with Farmingdale Lanes. I always look at places when I walk around town and I always go like, man, this would be a great place for a meet and greet, or this, especially like sports cards places. But a bowling alley is perfect. They're huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why
Yeah,
they
and we
still
did
don't.
something previously with Staten Island Lanes in Brooklyn, which was another promotion. I brought several wrestlers there. So, yeah, I mean, it was kind of this, as Bob was talking about, an interesting connection between wrestling and bowling.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I wonder why it's not more prominent now.
You know, the only reason you couldn't put an actual card in a bowling alley is that the roofs I don't think are high enough.
Yep.
You know, you think about it. You could. They have the square footage to be a great venue for wrestling matches when you think about it. But I just think it's the topography would not work particularly well.
Well, I have experience with that because in 1993 I promoted a show in the ballroom at the Ramada Hotel at LaGuardia Airport, and that ceiling was so low. I mean, they couldn't do anything off the top rope, and I had Conan against Sabu, and they talked about how they almost hit the ceiling on some of the spots. But yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. That would have been a great place for a show or in the parking lot or whatever. But, you know, that was then. This is now.
Yeah. But, you know, it's funny you mention it because in my scant history as a play-by-play announcer for ECW, Eastern Championship Wrestling, one of the matches was at the Chestnut Cabaret, and a guy did a top rope suplex, and I was scared because the clearance of the ceiling was not that high. And I actually said as part of, my God, there's not enough clearance for him to do that, is there? And then I made an exclamation when they hit the mat, and it was perfect. And that may have been actually a good call. I think that if I had appointed something for a resume to do wrestling on TV, that call I think was really not bad, you know.
Right.
But I know what you mean, because when they're going up and there's not a lot of, you figure as they kick the legs up into the air, they're going to hit something. Mm-hmm. That's my old scene. I'd probably the same for you, I'd imagine.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, doing wrestling shows at clubs, that's always a danger, depending on how big how far the ceiling is. But these guys are, you know, they take enough risks. They don't need to be hitting their head on a ceiling at a match. But yeah, thank God no one was hurt.
I can't imagine there was any pre-prep, not in a small venue like that. You know, like if you have ever been as a journalist at Madison Square Garden or another arena 2-3 hours before the show, you will see the ring being used for practice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but at the indie shows, that's usually not the case because you're moving into some place where there's other stuff going on, particularly a bar or, you know, an entertainment venue. So I imagine that there was no, you really got to calculate correctly to do a move like that.
Exactly. And yeah, I hear about that show that I promoted today from guys like Sabu, and there was another friend who was at the Cauliflower Alley show, and he was at that show, and he goes, and he remembered it, how low that ceiling was, and he thought that somebody was going to get hurt. But you know, that's what it was, you know, promoting indie shows back in the day, and you don't see much of that anymore.
I got to tell you, if there's one thing I miss all these years later is going to those type shows like the one you promoted and similar shows. That was the most fun I had. It really was. You never knew who or what you were going to see. The young guys always busted their asses at an indie show because they were trying to make a name for themselves, you know, even if it was in front of people who were casual fans, so to speak. You know, high school, you know.
Another one of the smaller, I don't know if you ever went to this venue, it was in Brooklyn. It was in Bensonhurst. It was called the Brooklyn Roll-A-Rama.
No.
And it was on 86th Street. It was like a small little place where people used to go roller skating. And so the ring was set up in the middle of the rolling rink. Now that was a fairly low ceiling. That was in Brooklyn. This was in the early 70s.
This wasn't the Johnny Rod stuff, was it?
Well, I don't think. No, Johnny promoted underneath the Brooklyn Bridge.
Right.
Bensonhurst was, different location, obviously, and I never forget one show I saw Freddie Blassie there. You know,
really,
and the main event was Pedro Morales against Lonnie Main. So it was kind of a cool. It was 73, I think it was 73.
Bulldog yet?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was Moondog Lonnie Main. He was right after that Garden show. I think it was in the spring of 73, and I never forget standing outside and seeing Freddie Blassie walk up, and I was running his fan club at the time, and my little sister met him for the first time there, and you know, and that was something about Fred too. Is like he met my sister one time, and in every letter he wrote me or postcard, or anytime I spoke to him, "How's your sister doing? How is she doing? That kid is great," you know. And he always asked about my parents. I mean, that was kind of a cool thing, and that was a little place to roll around. It was a really cool place in Bensonhurst. So yeah, those days are long gone, and you miss them. And that's why we do the show here. We talk about the old days, not the 70s, not the 80s mostly, but the 90s, and we have a really good one. So Marsh, you know, I know you're there you're like the Wizard of Oz. You're behind the curtain, pulling the strings, pressing the buttons, pulling the clips. And we always appreciate you, and each and every week it seems to get better and better.
I appreciate that. Holler if you need me. Poof.
We will, and if you catch a mistake or something like that, you know when to pop up and say, "Hey, listen, guys, I got the answer to this," or you know, we know you're there, listening, watching, all ears, all eyes.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Marsh. Before we get to the meat of the show, I certainly want to talk about our Patreon account, and that is the place where you can go get this show for $5 a month. You get this show early. You get the YouTube show early, and you get the entire archives of the Pro Wrestling Spotlight from 1989 right through this episode. New episodes coming each and every Sunday. And we also have vintage clips that we've been putting up that are really classic from the mid-'70s from the WWF. So a lot of stuff there. And then for $10 and up, you get access to vintage videos, and there's 8mm films from Madison Square Garden, photo sets. There's Zoom meetings, which we just did, which was a great, Bob. I mean, that last Zoom, we had the biggest attendance that we've had, and we had it was supposed to go around an hour, but this one was almost an hour and a half. And our friend Anthony Pyrus was at the football game, the Patriots game against Chicago. And he was on the Zoom call from the stadium. It was kind of hilarious.
Amazing. And you know what? I want to thank everybody who got involved with that, particularly the last Zoom call. We had a blast, and what a great bunch. I mean, every one of them just contributed so much to the conversation, and we really enjoy talking to you guys. We really do. It's a really special moment when we get to find out what's on your mind, and we can talk about current events, and we can be off the cuff because it's not part of the regular show.
Right. Yeah, it's really a lot of fun, and we had Marsh join us this time as well, and we had a good turnout. We had Rowan there from Australia who joins us when he can each week. He had a day off from work, so he joined, and all the others that participated, and we'll do another one next month, probably right before Thanksgiving. And we love doing that. And all you got to do to be a part of that is just be a patron member. It doesn't matter what level. If you're a $5 a month level or higher, you get that invite, and you get to chat with us and talk about whatever's on your mind. And it's a good sounding board for our fans, our patrons, to let us know what they like about the show, what they don't like, the new direction, the video stuff. So that feedback is really important to us. So become a patron, patreon.com/John Arezzi, and you could be a part of that monthly Zoom call that we do, that monthly Zoom video chat, I guess you call it, and get all the other benefits that come with being a patron. So, Bob, here we are. Episode number 52 of this podcast. We officially begin our second year with you, my friend. We had a good first year, and it's getting better and better. And today we're going to cover.
You refer to this as the second season, right? We're in our second season. If you want to look,
season 2 now. Yes,
season 2.
We're in season 2.
They said it wouldn't last. We showed them. We showed them.
Yes, we did, and it's just getting better and better. And we got so much more to cover. So this show today is going to take you back to December 5th, 1992. Show number 182 in the history and the archives of Pro Wrestling Spotlight, or Pro Wrestling This Week as we're known right now. And so we have some really cool stuff today. We have the British Bulldog finally, part 1 of the interview there. We have a special appearance by the Lightning Kid. as well, discussing a recent injury that could have been a career ender at that time for him. So we're going to get on to it. And Bob, let's go back in time and start this zany episode.
Well, John, what for the fans who are listening, what radio station were we on at this point? And the name of the show was Pro Wrestling This Week still, right?
Mm-hmm. WNYG, Pro Wrestling This Week. Yeah, we don't go to Pro Wrestling Spotlight again until we get back on WEVD in February of '93, which is only a few months away now. Right. Those discussions were already underway, but we also kept the WNYG show, so we had two shows, and we're going to have a lot to cover as we get into 1993 and in real time 2023. As we talk about having 2 hours to cover each and every week.
Daunting, I'm sure it was.
Daunting, yes.
And Marsh made a really good note here. He says, you start the show and you say, wake up. Why did you tell your audience to wake up? Was this on earlier than usual, or did you have...
I probably was saying that to myself.
Yeah, it wasn't, yeah.
I was younger back then, and usually on a Friday night before we taped the show, I'd be out, having a few drinks somewhere, and sometimes, it was a morning show, so just getting up. I think the show aired about 10 or 11 a.m. 10 or 11 a.m.
Right,
and it wasn't like it was far away. I only lived a mile from WNYG, but like I said, if I was out the night before, that could have caused the problem and the wake up call.
Well, I tell you what, it was very rare for you to have two stars of this magnitude on one show. You wanted to tell the listeners who they are?
Yeah, we've been trying to get the British Bulldog, and it was week after week, and finally I set up a time to tape an interview with him, and it was a long one. It's up for patrons in its entirety, but this interview, we played part one of that really in-depth insider interview with Bulldog right after he left the WWF, and he goes and describes, as you'll hear. So you could hear the whole thing on patreon.com/John Arezzi, but we'll play clips here today. But that is a big part of today's look back, and also the interview with a very young a performer who was getting a big name for himself called the Lightning Kid, Sean Waltman, who went on to be X-Pac and 1 through 3 Kid and all the other names that he's used. He had more names than I did. So yeah, it's gonna be a good one with these clips and the other things that we're gonna play today.
Well, I'll tell you what, Sean, or Lightning Kid, or whatever you want to call him, made it because he had that ooh and ah factor when he was young, didn't he? He did things in the ring that very few people could do at the time. He opened up eyes. It didn't matter that he was a little, that was the muscle era, a little on the skinny side, some would say.
He was very skinny.
Didn't matter, but it didn't matter. He did things in the ring and took risks and had unbelievable coordination and athletic ability. And he was a star for the minute. He stepped into global in my eyes. He had it going on. It's just a matter of where he was going to land and how they were going to use him.
Right. And he got his big break, of course, on that Monday Night Raw when he pinned Razor Ramon and became the 1, 2, 3 Kid. But, yeah, he was destined for greatness, and he's had a Hall of Fame career, obviously. He's been inducted. Obviously, he's got more than one WWE Hall of Fame ring.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool. I mean, imagine getting in more than once in a wrestling Hall of Fame. That's it's like the Four Horsemen with Ric Flair and things like that.
Yeah, D-Generation X and NWO. He's in for both.
Right.
I don't know if he's in individually too. I'm not sure. He might be in individually as well. I don't know.
It's a long list at this point.
Marsh would know for sure.
Print a long list of everybody that's in the Hall, including the old. Special inductee.
He's not in individually, but he's also gone on record before and said that he prefers not to. He feels like a lot of his accomplishments he were most happy about was the ones with his friends. So he's more than satisfied being in with his friends, especially twice.
Yeah, NWO and D-Generation X. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. Although I agree with your guys' sentiment that there's nothing wrong with his solo career that shouldn't allow him to go in individually anyways. So
yeah, no, he Lightning Kid, the name, his original, early name, but it was appropriate. It was just, there was something about him that was different and special, and every promoter that booked him from probably 91, 92 on saw that in him.
Yeah.
You know, there were a lot of young guys, but they didn't get the push that he did because he was, you know what, he used his training, his Japanese, you know, he was trained in Japan, I believe.
Yes. Yeah.
And you could tell he was just entirely different than most of the young stars at that point.
And it all still holds up. It's all worth going up and watching.
One of the biggest memories that we had, I mean, it's a sad one, was the fact when he did his first appearance. That was a live remote with Missy Hyatt and Jason Hervey and Alex Marvez, and that's where he learned that his trainer had died. Mm-hmm. He heard it on the air, based on Donnie Laible's news capsule. So that was a horrific day for him, and he just couldn't snap out of it. Even, you know, he found out the shocking news, and that's what really stands out about his very first appearance on the show. But this one's a little bit different, but it's still covering an incident that could have led to the end of his career. So luckily he escaped. But you were saying how great he was. But yeah, one of the promoters that saw that right away in him was Dennis Carluzzo. Mm-hmm. And Dennis made it a point to use him fairly often in New Jersey. So, you know, Sean always credits Dennis with giving him a lot of his early breaks up in the Northeast. I'm
just sitting here remembering his roundhouse kicks. Remember those?
Yes.
You ever see anything like that before he did it?
No, he was great. He just was a game changer in so many ways, so innovative.
Oh, man. I mean, it was like 6 feet in the air, a kick.
Yeah.
On one leg. It was incredible. Incredible. He was an amazing athlete. Still probably is. You know, the cream rises to the top.
That's very true.
Well, speaking of Don Laible, do you want to let's start the show? And of course, we have the one-man wrestling encyclopedia, Don Laible, from upstate New York at the time, and he's going to have all the news of the day. And on December 5th, 1992, John, shall we go to it?
Yeah, absolutely. And before we get to that, too, I mean, we, you know, the producer, we brought Bruce Jacobs back. And, Bob, that was, you're not maybe familiar with Bruce, but this was Bruce's return to the show. And I think Donnie mentions him as well. So anyway, let's go to the Don Laible report. And then, you know, as we get into it, we'll talk a little bit more about Bruce, because Bruce was a guy that really was helpful. And we gave him his start in radio. He was a salesman at PC Richards, which you must be familiar of, being on Long Island. He was a sales guy. He met my sister. He was looking to get into broadcasting. My sister said, my brother does this wrestling show. And he came in and volunteered and interned back in '89 when we first started. And lo and behold, he became he started his own talk show on sports at WNYG. And he has been on network. He's been on The Fan. He's been all over the country. And he still is a broadcaster out of, I believe he's out of Arizona, out of Phoenix. He's a very right wing guy, and he's a very ultra conservative talk show host, and a very volatile. He creates a lot of news. But Bruce got a start on the Pro Wrestling Spotlight in radio. This was his first gig, and it was based on my sister just saying that she met a great sales guy at PC Richards, and he wants to get into broadcasting. So can I talk to him? And lo and behold, we did. Bruce had left the show to do other things, and then he came back to help us produce it. And he also goes and brings and joins us back at WEVD when we get back on there. But anyway, let's go to the news capsule. We talk about the Royal Rumble. There's a lot of stuff that Donnie covers today, so let's get to that right now.
Let's bring on the Don right now. Don, are you there?
If Bruce Jacobs was back, I would have gotten dressed up this morning for that.
You're still in your PJs. You wearing your Hulkamania PJs today?
Woo, you bet. Hey, I'm pumped up. We've got a lead story here that when I found out, let's get ready to rumble. Besides the regular crew of the World Wrestling Federation characters on the January Royal Rumble to be held in Sacramento, California. Well, pacemakers, worst, turn down your radio because it's going to be Puerto Rico's Carlos Colon, Japan's Tenaru, and the King of Memphis, Jerry Lawler. That's who they will be in the Royal Rumble. Now, in the main event, Bret Hart defends the heavyweight championship against Razor Ramon. And preliminary reports indicate that the recent Survivor Series pay-per-view drew an estimated 1.3 buy rate, which, if the numbers hold up, will be the worst recordings of all their pay programs. And once again, it appears Paulie Dangerously is not in World Championship Wrestling's future plans. The Bad Boy manager does, however, have to be paid on his existing contract that runs through April 1994. And this past week, Paulie was spotted at his favorite night spot, the China Club, with actor Bruce Willis. Well, as John mentioned earlier, Clementon, New Jersey is a place that the Lightning King is going to want to forget for some time. Now, he is back home in Minnesota resting comfortably after spending some time in the hospital this past week due to suffering a concussion during a match in New Jersey with Bill Wilcox. That happened last Saturday. Now, on the WWA show, apparently when Wilcox dove out of the ring at his challenger, he was going to come up short, so the kid attempted to soften the blow as best he could, and he ended up getting the worst of the collision. Well, Christmas for wrestling fans on Long Island especially will continue on to December 26th. Former Intercontinental Champion Davey Boy Smith and former WWF Tag Titleist Jim the Anvil Neidhart, they will be appearing at the Farmingdale Lanes between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. and at Comac Lanes between 3 and 6 p.m. Now, autographs on that day, photos, opportunities, have your picture taken with the two stars will be in the offering at both locations. Last Friday night, November 27th, in Dallas, Texas, at the Sportatorium, there was a change in tag team titleists in the Global Wrestling Federation. The Texas Mustangs, Bobby Duncombe Jr. and Big John Hawk, they won the belts from Johnny Mantell and Black Bart. And finally, from the scrapbooks of 1980, a dozen years ago this week in pro wrestling, in Buffalo, New York, Angelo Mosca defeated Jimmy Snuka. Dick the Bruiser topped Ernie Ladd in Chicago. And it was Bobo Brazil pinning Nikolai Volkov in Orlando, Florida. For Pro Wrestling This Week, I'm Don Laible reporting. Capsule time, 10:08.
Well, thank you, Don. But another big story has been breaking over the last day or so, and we've got some late-breaking information regarding the Steiner brothers. They will be appearing at the WWF's first television tapings in January, and they'll be going on the road right after that. So the Steiners officially going to the WWF, and they'll be going around the horn, first of all, with Double Trouble. Mm-hmm. So the Steiners making their move. Their last show was in the Tokyo Egg Dome for New Japan on January 4th, right into the WWF, right on the road, taking on Double Trouble.
And it looks like, no doubt, that they will have either an interview or something to do with Royal Rumble because of the larger-than-normal viewing audience.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure they'll be on that show.
What do you think about Jerry Lawler on a WWF card? That's amazing. That's one face, literally and figuratively, that you never thought would have anything to do with quote-unquote New York. And I think that's amazing. I mean, I'm happy to see that, but Jerry Lawler, to me, this smells like a summit coming up that the World Wrestling Federation may want to get back into Puerto Rico. They may want to strengthen things unless it's fallen apart down in Memphis. They might want to get something going in Japan once again. Boy, that's going to be a big weekend in Sacramento.
Yeah, I can't believe that Lawler is actually going to be appearing in the WWF card. He's bashed the WWF for several years, and I guess you can't burn any bridges. Yeah. Maybe I should call Vince up and ask for some cooperation now since he's talking to Lawler. Hey, give us a shot and give us a couple of guests. Vince, you listening?
Nice try.
Yeah, nice try. It's right.
Yeah. Hey, let me put an exclamation point on a couple of Donnie's points. The John Hawk in Global was later known as
KBL.
That's right. I believe this was his first name. And let me tell you, I was obviously still at the magazine at this point because I remember calling Jerry Lawler after he made his Garden debut, Madison Square Garden, against Tito Santana, or the Matador as he was known at that point, I think. And he came out and got so much heat, and I was at that card, that I had to call him up and say, dude, the heat you got was just great. Just by being Jerry Lawler, grab the mic, say a few things, insult everybody in town. He was so over in New York when he made his debut that I could hardly fathom it. I mean, he brought the house down. Won the match by holding on the ropes, sneaky Jerry Lawler routine. It was just great. But the thing about it was, I also remember that card he was on drew about 8,900 people. He was in the middle of the card because he was just kind of debuting at that point. But him sneaking in the back door to the WWE was a really, really big deal because, like Don said, after all this, or like you said, after all these years of just putting the WWF down, putting them down. It was like a new era that began, and he brought a new flavor to the WWF that they didn't have at that point.
No, it was a great addition to the roster. You know, Lawler, obviously, with his legacy, even up at that time. I mean, the King of Memphis, and I don't know how many people might know this, but he kind of started as a cartoonist.
Yes, he did.
He was in Wrestling Monthly, beginning with their debut issue in '72, as he sketched a almost like a comic strip called The Patriot. Mm-hmm. So that's where he started, and he's still an incredible artist today. But he's an artist in the ring. He's an artist outside the ring. He is the king. He's Jerry Lawler, and what a career this guy's had.
Well, I told you I spent a week in Memphis, and he was gracious enough to kind of show me everything, including his abode where he lived. He showed me his home, and he showed me a lot of his artwork, and I was just so impressed. I mean, tremendous artist. He could have been a great commercial artist, even if he never got into wrestling. He's that good. I mean, he can do a serious thing. He can do a comic strip. He can do any type of art. He's just naturally gifted that way.
Yes,
and
very much so.
I just, but like you, seeing him in the WWF for the first time, and like I said, I was at his Garden working debut, and somebody was smart enough to stick him on color commentary too.
And look where that led. My goodness. Yes. What a great announcer. A great commentator. When
you want to think, we always talk about the greatest announcers of all time, but what was the greatest team? It's JR and Lawler kind of pop into my mind first.
Yeah, right up there when you're talking about duos who called matches, and he was great at color. And of course, everybody remembers that he actually had that heart attack while he was on the air on Monday Night Raw, and that was almost the end of him. And he came back from that. I mean, what a career, what a life, what a legacy Jerry the King Lawler's had. And we just are so happy that he's still active and still doing work, and just the King. What else can I say, Bob? The King.
Yeah, well, what's interesting about his WWF tenure too? He kept right on doing the Memphis territory at the same time. Mm-hmm. Right on doing it, right until probably about 3 minutes ago. He just kept right on. I don't know if there even is a Memphis territory now, to be honest with you. I think there is, but I don't know who's involved with it. But he just kept right on going. I mean, he could be working somewhere tonight for all I know. He still does the occasional show,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he does. Right. Yeah. And of course, one of the most famous angles ever, which with Andy Kaufman. I mean, that changed the game, man.
Got to give my friend Bill Apter a lot of credit on that one.
That's right.
Instrumental people involved in that, and great. One of the great moments of wrestling history was that Letterman appearance. My God.
Oh my God! I thought it was real, and I think almost everybody in the wrestling business thought it was real. I mean, it was like that. That was worked in such a way where that blurred reality.
But the audience thought it was real too.
Oh yeah,
the audience in that studio thought they had and they were so good, both of them. My God, I watched it. I went, "This is a red letter day for wrestling," and I still feel that way. I think it was one of the most best wrestling crossover things ever.
Oh, it gave mainstream publicity to pro wrestling like never before, really. And did you see the episode of Tales from the Territories with the Kaufman, that whole Kaufman episode that aired a few weeks on A&E? So they did an entire episode on that angle, on that storyline with Andy Kaufman and Lawler, and Bill Apter overhearing a conversation that Lawler was having with Vince McMahon Sr. about wanting to do something in wrestling, and Vince was like, no, and then Bill was like, I know somebody that might be able to help you, and that was Jerry the King, and he hooked them up, and the rest is history.
People who aren't familiar with the Memphis territory, and that was most people back then because they had no access to it, but that angle, the Lawler Kaufman feud went on for a long, long time. It wasn't just the one thing with the pile driver that put him in the hospital.
Right. Oh, it was a long program.
going, and there was some tremendous. First of all, the how they got to that match was great in and of itself, with a bunch of insulting interviews going back and forth. And then there was the match that put Kaufman in the hospital with a neck injury, and he was wearing a neck brace for like 6 months or something. But he became like a manager type afterwards in Memphis, a sneaky bastard that he was, Kaufman. He was a heel. You know, you would think a Hollywood star would not become a heel, but he was a sneaky heel, you know, and he ran in cahoots with Jimmy Hart and did a double turn on Lawler. Everything they touched was gold. And they packed the Memphis Mid-South Coliseum for those shows. They really did.
Oh, they did. And, of course, Kaufman was an early – he loved Buddy Rogers. He loved Freddie Blassie. So he loved wrestling. And what a loss when he passed away at such a young age, and what a legend, and what he did for the wrestling business. I really would recommend, if anyone has not seen the Tales for the Territories episode with the entire story of how that unfolded, to watch it on A&E. It's available on demand, and I'm going to watch it again. I loved it. It was fabulous. So, yeah,
I got to see this. But you know what set Kaufman apart from other non-wrestling people who got involved with wrestling? He knew wrestling and he understood wrestling walking in. You know, he
loved it. He was obsessed with it.
But he respected it too. He respected it for what it was.
Yep.
When the minute he walked in Memphis, he knew the score. And I think that the promotion there knew that he knew the score, and they said, "We got gold here," and they did. It was awesome.
Yeah. It was funny. It was funny. Just one other point on this. I mean, when he had gotten that pile driver and he was laying prone in the ring in Memphis, and he wouldn't get up, and the referee had come over and he says, "I need an ambulance." And so the referee goes over to Lawler and he said he needs an ambulance, and Lawler whispered back, "Tell him the ambulance is $300." You know, so, and then he went back to Kaufman, and Kaufman said, "I'll pay it." And that's when they got the ambulance, and he laid in the ring prone until that ambulance showed up about 20 minutes later, and then went into the emergency room. And I mean, he just played it off like it was real, and he didn't tell anyone that it was a work.
The night of that match, Channel 11 News in New York showed clips from it.
Mm-hmm.
The night of the match. I don't know how they got it. Maybe it was the night after. And, you know, I think Jerry Gerard was the sportscaster. He goes in, and as Kaufman is being wheeled into the back, he's being pelted with garbage. So classic for a wrestling fan. and, well, you have to realize how the promos that Kaufman did on the way to the Lawler feud was just, he was insulting Memphis. He held up a bar of soap and goes, "You people need to wash. This is soap." I mean, he went lower than any heel did. I mean, he was just insulting to the Memphis fans, and they hated him from the minute he walked in. He was so good at it.
He was.
That was Kaufman. He was the anti-comedian's comedian. You know, he would do that and invent a character named Tony Clifton, who was a talentless lounge singer.
Yep, who was his agent.
Audiences that didn't expect to see him. He would open for himself as Tony Clifton. You know, it was just, and he was one of a kind. There's nothing like
him. He was. Nobody like him, and no one's ever been like him ever since.
No, that's for sure. But what great memories of John. I'm enjoying this conversation because it really is one of my favorite things in my wrestling history was the Kaufman-Lawler feud.
Me too.
And seeing him enter the WWE with Jerry Lawler, I thought it was a turning point for both Lawler and the WWE because it changed things a lot. Because he followed Flair in there, and things got a little more serious. You know, no more garbage men. The garbage men were going away. We were getting stars from other areas, and they were allowed to act like the stars from other areas, which was refreshing. You know, That was pretty cool. Hey, let's take an ad break.
Yes, time for commercial.
Time for commercials. This is how our show differs from our previous format, in that now we're bringing you the best in ads from the Pro Wrestling Spotlight. John, what do we have for them?
Well, I mean, we did have a commercial break, and we talked about the British Bulldog coming to Long Island for the meet and greet at Farmingdale Lanes, and then being joined by Jim the Anvil Neidhart. So that was kind of a cool thing to put together. So we played an ad for them, and then the Alert Coach lines, because we chartered buses for them. I did a trade deal with them, so we'd give them advertising for the bus. And then we have a special promo wishing listeners a Merry Christmas. We're going to get to that. And then right after that, a commercial for our dear friend Mickey B, which I'll follow up with some comments when we're done.
This is Jim Cornette of the Midnight Express. I want to wish everybody out there a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, and be sure on Christmas Eve, light a fire in that fireplace because Santa's butt needs warmed.
Jim Cornette.
Yeah, I mean, we cut several of those. I just love those Christmas promos. That was kind of my favorite time of the year when I was able to pull out these promos from wrestlers like Eddie Gilbert and Terry Funk. And I think I had Bam Bam Bigelow and a few others. And I just had them cut these Christmas promos. And Jimmy Cornette, of course, that was a cool one as well. So that was actually really cool. So, and then, we had a commercial for our good buddy Mickey B and his jukebox review. So let's go to that.
Hi, this is Mickey B reminding you to be with me from 11 to 2 every Saturday on the Mickey B Jukebox Review as we go back in time to the 50s and 60s and play some of those great hit recordings. We'll see you every Saturday. Write it down, 11 to 2 on the Mickey B Jukebox Review.
Groovy.
Yes, groovy. The man, if it wasn't for Mickey on that plane introducing Cyndi Lauper to Lou Albano, who knows what would have happened? I mean, it's kind of like it's just really serendipitous when they introduced Lauper to Captain Lou, and then before you know it, and I would advise everyone to see that history of WrestleMania 1. That's another wonderful documentary that's out there on A&E right now. Look for it on demand, and that whole story is told. And Cyndi, of course, talks about how she met Captain Lou on a plane ride from Puerto Rico back to the States, and it was that Mickey B who introduced him. So, yeah, what a guy who could have changed the history of wrestling just with a little introduction.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. The more I'm learning about Mickey B, I didn't know much about him until I met you, John. And I'll tell you what, the more I think he needs more recognition nationally and locally, especially. I think he was a really special guy. Not only that, but he must have been the last guy formatting that type of music, too, at that point in history. This 91, 92, he's still playing 50s, 60s rock and roll. The greaser stuff. So he may have been the last of his kind on the airwaves at that point.
Yeah, he dedicated his show to that. And then he went on from NYG. He went on to, and you're probably familiar with this station, B103.
Sure.
On Long Island. And he moved his show over there when NYG went under. And he continued on really to the latter days of his life, promoting these wonderful doo-wop shows throughout the New York metropolitan area with all of those great doo-wop artists. And it's a lost art today, Bob. I mean, there's not very many people alive that listen to doo-wop, but it was a genre of music that really was the 1950s. It really was the 1950s and early 60s.
Well, I'll give Long Island a plug in that it's still alive. As I sit here, I'm sitting in Long Island, gang, and
yep.
Long Island is still the home of doo-wop. There are still doo-wop shows that pop up at the Westbury, what used to be the Westbury Music Fair. I forget what they call it, in the NYCB Theater in Westbury or whatever they call it.
Right.
But I believe that every year they run at least one doo-wop event. And I can't think of another theater that's
losing so many of them now. I mean,
problem is the artists are fading away on us. So
right.
It's like the 1969 Mets. There are very few of our heroes that are still able to come to the ballpark anymore. It's the same with doo-wop. That the original stars are.
And NYG had a lot of these doo-wop guys on the air, and because NYG had changed formats many times, but they were an oldie station mostly. They had Lenny Coco from Lenny Coco and the Chimes. He had an air shift there.
That's right.
Kathy Jean was another one. Harry Hepcat, of course, Mickey. So NYG, and my sister Donna is a historian when it comes to doo-wop, and because she worked at NYG. Yeah, she worked at NYG longer than almost anyone in the history of that station, and she was well connected. And she's the one that she's actually the one. My sister's actually the one that got Mickey B on the radio. She wanted to. She met him. My sister's such a vibrant person, and she met Mickey, and before you know it, she gets him a radio show on WNYG, and that's what kind of took off his promoting career as well. So, I got to credit my sister Donna for bringing Mickey B aboard to the WNYG family back then, and that really kind of skyrocketed his interest in music and doo-wop promoting. And anyway, I mean, Donna did it. Yeah.
Donna did it. Well, there you go. And his little finger in the wrestling business too.
Yeah, I mean that was it. I mean it was it's like you never know, who you open a door for or what is going to happen when you open a door or introduce someone to someone else. And it's the way life should be. It's you should really try to help as many people as you can and open a door for somebody and not look for anything back. It's just like you never know whose life you're going to change or touch if you just show a little kindness and try to help people. I mean, that's kind of the way I've lived my life. And it's just, you never know. I mean, you just want to treat people the way you want to be treated, and open a door for somebody and allow them to enter and give them an opportunity. So many things can happen from that. All possible.
There you go. And John, you've had your share of travails and troubles in the wrestling business.
Mm-hmm.
I've had my share of travails and troubles, but you know what? Those golden moments make up for all the bad stuff.
They do.
And I look back with it, like I said, every day at my age now, a lot of gratitude, because it's like I did stuff that most schmoes don't get a chance to do, and you did too. Mm-hmm. So you got beat up by Dusty Rhodes, for God's sakes. It's like, I think people can say that,
Yeah, it was funny as I was talking today with the director of the Dusty Rhodes documentary, which is coming on the air through A&E. And that's going to be a classic one. And he's just a legendary documentary producer, not only with WWE, who he hasn't really had a short-term relationship, but with baseball, with HBO and with and ESPN, the 30 for 30s. So we were talking about Dusty today. And I explained to him how Dusty cleaned my clock back in 1978, and he was like, "Oh, kidding," And it's ironic because this is another full circle moment for me, because I met this dude in 1982. When I worked in the summer of 82 for Major League Baseball Productions on the show This Week in Baseball. And Joe, the same guy, worked there at the same time I did. He had started in 81. So here we are 40 years later talking to each other about this is a baseball project that I'm talking to him about involving John Gibbons. I mean, it's full circle. It's full circle. I mean, it's like the older you get, you run into people that you haven't talked to in years, and I'm just like, I know you. Yeah, that's right. Oh shit, you worked in Major League Baseball. Yeah, I did too. And that's where I met Sean Mooney, because Sean Mooney worked there at the same time.
Really?
In Major League Baseball. Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't know you had anything. I loved This Week in Baseball. I loved that show.
Yeah, I had it. It was called A Viewer. So basically, and I was like, I should have stayed there, but what I did is, like, to get in any entry level job in Major League Baseball Productions at the time, And it was kind of funny how I even got there, because I had come back to New York and I wanted a job in baseball, and I had worked with the Shelby Mets. So I was interviewing with the Mets because they started this screen called the Diamond Vision screen at Shea Stadium. So it was the first season of Diamond Vision.
1980?
And I was it was 82. It was 1982. Okay. And I was a finalist for the job, and I came in second because I didn't have enough TV production experience. And they said, well, we're going to introduce you to Major League Baseball because they're growing. And so they get me an interview with Major League Baseball, and lo and behold, I get hired as an entry-level viewer. So I'd have about 5 TV screens in front of me watching 5 different games simultaneously. And I'd write down the time codes, like for a home run or for a great catch or a manager getting ejected. And I'd write the time codes down, and then the editors would take it, and I'd put together This Week in Baseball with Mel Allen from that. But I stayed there because I was at NYG at the same time selling advertising, and I was making a lot more money selling the advertising. And the Major League Baseball job was paying me like $200 a week. And I left prematurely before I had a chance to grow with the company. And that was one of the biggest mistakes of my early career because, I always talk about how baseball, is a passion of mine, and happy to be back in the day. But anyway, it's just like full circle life. It's crazy shit,
Absolutely. Well, speaking
of the Davey Boy,
I was going to say, Davey Boy Smith, one of the all-time greats. You had little trouble hooking this up, as I recall.
Yeah, well, I kept trying to reach him, and the phone would ring or be busy, or he wasn't around, and because I've been promoting it for how many weeks now? 3 weeks, maybe, talking about Davey Boy, and finally, I was able to get him on the phone, and we taped an interview. I made sure that we taped it because if I tried to get him on live, who knows what would happen. And this was the time when he just left the WWF, and the full interview in its entirety can be heard on Patreon, patreon.com/John Arezzi.
This is another one of those interviews that you conducted where I always thought of him as an old school type of guy, the way he presented himself on camera and whatnot. And he really got into the meat and potatoes of everything.
Oh, he did. Surprised the hell out of me when he got so inside about what happened and his departure and the SummerSlam thing. And it's a fascinating, groundbreaking interview, I felt.
Yeah, that's why I think if you really want to hear what a John's, this is right up there. John's greatest interviews in my mind are not necessarily ones you may think of. I think Tom Zink was incredible. Considering who Tom Zink was at the time, he was kind of like three quarters of a superstar, but never really made it to the top rung. Mm-hmm. But this one with Davey Boy Smith, who really had made it, particularly after the match he had with Bret Hart. After all the success with the British Bulldogs too, I just think that this is a revelation. This one was really different and really juicy.
It was. It was. And we had to do it in 2 parts. I mean, the full interview was over 30 minutes.
Yeah, but worth every second of it. This is one of those rare ones where the more you listen, the better it gets. And I'm not saying that to get people to listen to Patreon. I'm just saying.
No, it's juicy. Like you said, it is a juicy interview. And this SummerSlam thing for him was kind of a straw that broke the camel's back, even though it was the biggest night of his wrestling career. Mm-hmm. But it was also one of the saddest because what the WWF did and the things they prevented him from doing. There was just a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that we didn't know about. And then, of course, he got hurt right before the match with a knee injury. I mean, it was, and you'll hear it all. And he talks so openly about that whole situation and what led to his leaving. And anyway, I think it's going to be fascinating for people to hear it, not just in the clips, but if you want to hear the whole thing, it's on Patreon.
Yeah. I equate Davey Boy's problem after that huge match to Jerry Lawler's problem with Vern Gagne after the Kerry Von Erich match at Super Clash 3. In other words, they both had this huge moment with national recognition, and they were gone 5 seconds later. Or at least it felt that way. You know what I'm saying? Because of problems behind the scenes, things that the fans aren't privy to. But he got to the bottom of it with you, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of the things that we talked about, his first time having Christmas and New Year's at home, departing the WWF, whether he was on good terms with Vince, the WWF talking about how exciting the European market was for the company, and Davey believing it was the problems with the WWF, in his opinion, was keeping him. They didn't want him to get too powerful in England. So there's a lot here. And him wanting to do his own thing, and Lennox Lewis getting involved with SummerSlam. But the clip we're going to play is how the WWF reported this split between them, because they said he was terminated for unprofessional conduct. So why don't we go to that clip, and you'll hear how fascinating it is.
We've been trying to get statements from the World Wrestling Federation on your departure, and it was quoted in the Charleston, South Carolina newspaper. Mike Mooneyham does a wrestling column. Steve Planamente had been quoted as saying in the paper there that you were terminated for unprofessional conduct. Do you have any statement or anything you could say regarding Planamente's statement in the press?
Well, I'm not really too familiar with Steve Planamente. I've not really had many conversations with this gentleman in the World Wrestling Federation.
He's kind of like a mouthpiece over there.
Yeah, that's what I hear. Yeah, because I heard it. He said something about I had a problem before. There's been a few rumors that when they say unprofessional conduct, what do they mean? Maybe I wrecked a hotel room, or
they're not very specific on that. That's kind of their standard answer when someone leaves the organization. Is that, all right? Well, he was gone. He's gone for unprofessional conduct.
Yeah, I just don't know. Nobody said to me, Davey, you're finished, or Davey, you're fired from the World Wrestling Federation. I said that I was unhappy as my situation went right now in the World Wrestling Federation. But as far as unprofessional conduct goes, there was no such thing. And then there was another rumor about something about maybe failing a drug test for steroids. That was out of the question entirely. I never failed no drug test for steroid use, or anything to do with steroids in the World Wrestling Federation. That was brought up too in one of the I don't know what you call them, the scam sheets, or inside whatever the Wrestling Observer has to print up. That was never the situation at all with me and Vince McMahon. I left on friendly terms, and he speaks highly of me, and I speak highly of him, because he's treated me well as far as up until the SummerSlam, and after that, then I thought I was being mistreated again, so I thought I'd leave,
And he did.
And he left. And he did leave. I mean, that was kind of a hard time for him, even though he had the highlight of his career. I mean, that was very controversial. It was a big surprise when he did leave. But yeah, there's so much more on this interview. I mean, he had not been paid yet for SummerSlam. So, I mean, there was a lot going on. And there was a lot of talent that was kind of unhappy at the time inside the organization. So we have another clip, Bob, that we'll play from this interview. And this is about a little bit more. Is he going to be with WCW? Is he talking to them? So anyway, let's go to that clip and hear what Davey has to say.
Have you had any talk with the Turner Group, WCW?
No, I haven't. No.
Because they're going over to Europe also in March, and that would certainly put their tour over the top if they could secure your appearance there. And as well as I'm sure that other independent promoters are contacting you as well, because the name of Davey Boy Smith, the British Bulldog, overseas right now, especially in the UK, would mean an instant sellout. I understand you're getting an awful lot of press overseas right now in the UK. Can you tell us some of the recent press that you've been getting over there?
I got the newspaper, the Daily Mirror. I'm in pretty good with those people. I'm in pretty good with the newspaper called The Sun. It's one of the biggest, or the biggest newspaper in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, I was talking to one of, I do a premium phone line overseas, and I understand that this past week there was matter of fact, this weekend, one of the major papers there had a 3-page spread on you, and I believe there's one of the TV books over there had you on the cover over this past week, and so your name is pretty predominant right now overseas.
Yeah, even though everybody knows now in the United Kingdom and Europe that I've left the World Wrestling Federation, not knowing how long for, but the newspapers still want to keep me strong in England, because I'm a hero to all the kids in England. The kids really look up to the British Bulldog.
Yeah.
I'm the only Brit who's in the World Wrestling Federation who has the physique and the wrestling ability to back it up.
Yeah.
And they're really behind me 100%. So the newspapers called me and said that they'd heard from a member of the World Wrestling Federation. I think it was the Mouth again, Planamenta, saying that I was fired for unprofessional conduct, and they didn't want to print that in the newspaper because they didn't want to ruin my name. So could I please tell them the story behind it? So they actually had highly recommended news reporter fly from England and come over and interview me in my own home in Tampa, Florida, and take pictures of my house, my bike, and my jet ski and things like that. Pool. I wanted to know the background of the World Wrestling Federation, and I told them truthfully as much as I could about the World Wrestling Federation and the wrestling situation right now, and just wanted to fill in the wrestling fans, let them know that the British Bulldog's still alive in the United Kingdom, and I'll be back one of these days,
That's one thing that we try to do here on Pro Wrestling This Week, is because you're on TV one week and the next week you're gone, and of course there's never an explanation on television as far as why someone departs the Federation. It's just as though you never existed. That's what's happening right now. You were mentioned during the Survivor Series, but of course now you're off television, and the fans just get very curious. Now, what happened to Bulldog? And now they could find out by listening to a program like this. At least some of the fans here in the New York area could find out where the Bulldog is.
Can you imagine what this guy was going through after, all the stuff that was going on, and then they release a statement saying unprofessional conduct, and he's trying to protect his name over in the UK, and they fly a reporter over to do a story on him, and it was really it was at the time, and I look back at it now 30 years later, and this was a very, very big story that really not a lot of people knew what was going on the inside to this day.
Absolutely right. And, I want to back it up one step. I just remember the SummerSlam match, Hart versus Davey Boy.
Yeah, amazing.
In my years at PWI, you come in on a Monday and you talk about the pay-per-view. And I think the entire office was agog at how great that match was. It was exactly what we as wrestling fans were craving.
Yeah.
A hard-ass, tough, realistic, serious wrestling match that was as good as anything that had been on WWE in years at that point. Am I right or wrong?
Right, you're absolutely right, and it had the family angle to it too. I mean, right. It was tearing up the families and that angle, and it could actually be the greatest match in the history of SummerSlam, if you look at it.
I'll take that. I'm trying to remember, and I was just checking some stuff. I believe that was PWI's match of the year that year. If it wasn't, I don't know what possibly could have been. I'll have to verify that. Maybe Marsh. Magic Bag of Tricks can figure that out. But the match was so good, and it was a star-making moment for him as a singles wrestler, I thought.
Yes, it was.
The British Bulldog tag team. Mm-hmm. And then poof. Poof. And
it was funny because that was kind of the height of his career, too, that SummerSlam match. And he never achieved the notoriety or fame. Because what they could have done with him after the momentum from SummerSlam back then, he could have been the world champion. Yeah. They could have pushed him, and they could have. it could have been a whole different story, but unfortunately, it didn't happen.
I will never understand any of that because to me, that's like, here comes Marsh. Marsh, do you have?
Yeah, yep. It was 92 PWI match of the year, Brett versus Bulldog.
At least my memory remembered that because
Absolutely.
it's
not a surprise either. It's funny you mentioned Sean Mooney before. If you ask Sean Mooney the best match he ever saw live, without missing a beat, he's always said that match still sticks with him.
It's still, if you watch it now, it still holds up like crazy. I mean, it's just a great wrestling match.
Yeah, and the stardom level that British Bulldog was on at that time, because I'll be real short and jump right back out, I think is why I have the next clip that we're going to have, is because it didn't occur to me until we got there just how big he really could have been if he had been leveraged correctly. Like, if these talks were already happening now, imagine if they had pushed it further. So I'll just say that and jump back out.
Yeah, I mean, this next clip we're going to play, by the way, I mean, because he's kind of thinking of, what am I going to do next? Is he going to be, is he going to wrestle? Is he going to go to, was there a non-compete? There's a lot of things we still don't know about his departure, but, he was kind of looking and exploring some TV stuff over in England. There was a gladiator show. So anyway, let's go to Davey again and hear what he was kind of thinking about as his next career move.
There are other opportunities that are awaiting you also in England. One of the things that we've heard about, and I don't know whether you want to comment on it or not, is a television program over there that you might possibly get involved in. The Gladiators, something like the American Gladiators?
Yeah, it's like the American Gladiators. I was approached on that. They wanted me to be a gladiator in England, and I guess you call it the British Gladiators, with, they're going to start doing the tapings around about March or April, and I'm going to be contacted by the producer again, David Lithgow, and find out whether I'm going to be on the Gladiators. So I'm still in training. I feel a lot better since I've finished right now with Titan, because I was getting pretty burned out on the road and flying every day from Anchorage to Hawaii, back to LA in the same day, and so my body's rested up now, and I'm back in the gym training out again. So I'm going to get in pretty good shape for Japan and hopefully do something on the British Gladiator TV show, and even some other TV shows in England, whether it be a comedy show or a game show, which I've done before, or the Muppets, or whatever, or going over the wrestling independently for another organization, whatever, but I will be back in England doing things again,
I don't understand wrestling promoters. First of all, I don't understand the whole separation from WWF. I just don't get it. To this day, I don't get it.
Yeah.
And it got worse for him.
Yeah, it did.
The next year signs with WCW.
Yeah, and then demons start kicking in too, and that was a big part of the decline. A lot of these
guys get promoted. Let me just make this one point. He headlined Beach Blast with Sting in 1993 against Vader and Sid. Now, on paper, think of that.
Mm-hmm.
Good, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they produced what may have been the all-time worst promotional video for a wrestling match in the history of anything. Do you remember this? It was a film vignette on a beach.
I don't.
Boat blew up or some shit, and it was like
vaguely now. Yeah,
it was the most. There's Robert Fuller as Colonel Parker and Harley Race. They're pointing fingers at each other, and it ends up everybody thinks that Sting and Davey Boy drowned, but no, they pop up out of the water like this, and B-level comedy. It wasn't even
B-level, whatever it was supposed to be. It was probably like B-level, and it was kind of like
it ranks as 1A after the spin the wheel, make the deal promo with Sting and WCW had a way of taking what would be gold, like the Cactus Vader angle, and turn it into the search for Cactus Jack.
Oh my God! Yes.
They had a way of turning absolute no fail ticket selling gold and turning it into poop. I don't know how else to put it. And
they turned a delicious ice cream into a shit sandwich.
There you go. Very good. Okay, you use the word. Okay, fine. But
I had to. What am I going to do? It's just what it was.
You have a hot Davey Boy Smith entering WCW, a great signing. And
Yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, this interview goes on and on. You can hear the whole thing on Patreon, and then we're going to have a part 2 next week. But the rest of this interview from this particular show, he talked about Dynamite Kid, because I asked him about that, whether they'd ever reunite, and he didn't think that Dynamite Kid would ever be back in the ring again. And then his years in the business, 15 years in the business. There's a lot of stuff to go over in this thing, and I keep pushing the Patreon because that's where we can hear the whole thing. And also the fact that this idea to go to Europe in the first place was his, and he said it to some WWF guys while they were at a Freddie Mercury concert, and Davey predicted that it would sell out in a week. And it only took 4 days, and the projections would only sell 50,000 tickets at Wembley, but they sold it out entirely. And he almost didn't even make the show because he had a knee injury so bad he almost had to retire. He got a staph infection in that knee before the match. He wasn't 100%, but he still delivered on it. It got 4 stars. And it had that big family angle element to it. And he believes, Davey says on this interview, that he believed it was the best show the WWF had ever done to that point. And it was the biggest thrill of his career. So anyway, we'll have more with Davey on the next episode here on the show. But yeah, that was one of the groundbreaking ones. And when I look back at it now after all these years, it could have been one of the best interviews I ever did.
Oh yeah,
on an insider level. Yeah.
Easy. And you know what? It was great for the fans too that were listening, because I think it humanized him and made him. He seemed very likable, very, very soft spoken, and very sincere about what he was saying. He was having some problems, but came across not like in a mean way. He said he had nice things to say about Mids.
He did.
So he wasn't bearing any grudges. He was simply explaining what was going on behind the scenes, which again, at the time when your show was on the air, that's pretty rare.
Yeah. And, the audience that I had at the time, which could have been numbering in the dozens at WNYG. So there wasn't really a lot of people that actually heard this thing to this day. And, our 83 patrons have the opportunity to hear the whole thing. But, yeah, it's still one of the most best kept secrets. What I'm thinking out loud here is maybe down the road a little bit until maybe first of the year or later on this year as a Christmas gift to everyone. Maybe I'll just put it up on YouTube and have Marsh put it up on YouTube and add a little visual to it and play that entire thing, because I think people would really be fascinated if it gets out there.
I really do. I agree with you. You're talking, you got 20 listeners, you said, ha, ha, ha. But you know what? I'm looking at the ad list.
NYG I did. I'm not being facetious here. That station wasn't heard. And maybe hundreds at the time, but there wasn't thousands.
Yeah, because I'm looking at your ad list here. This is one of I'm looking at the ad sales on this show look like one of the best you ever did. I mean, I'm looking at big names and.
Well, I know why.
Why is that?
Well, I mean, the station had a certain amount of inventory. That's where your PC Richards come in and your Gold Bond powder and your arthritis stuff. But it was also December. It was also Christmas. Mm-hmm. And Christmas, November, December in the advertising world is the best. I never had a bad November, December when I was on the air, because everyone wanted to advertise. And for me, it was Home Run Cards. It was L&S Comix. Right. It was all the seasonal advertisers, too, that want to go on and spend some money to capture some of that Christmas marketplace. And WNYG, and the reason I had some of these other ads like PC Richards, Baby Gold, Powder, arthritis stuff, is that they were obligated through this barter agreement to play a certain amount of national advertisers, but they would put them off on brokered shows so they can sell the local businesses and give them the prime positions in morning drive and afternoon drive, and then we'd get what they call the remnants of these national advertisers that they were obligated to run.
I see. Okay. So they were kind of
little radio lesson for you, Bob.
Yeah, they kind of inserted them in your show as a matter of business course.
They had to. Yeah. They had to. And that was my sister, because she was the traffic director. So she's like, I'm putting these spots in your show this week. I was like, all right, well, go ahead. We have to run them. I was like, well, yeah, we'll run them on my show. I don't care.
Well, look, it kind of reminds me of when I listened to this show on any podcasting network or, Spotify or whatever, and there's ads for Lexus. And we had nothing to do with that, but it comes with the territory,
Yeah, that's what they call dynamic ad insertion. It's the SAN network, and it's a Spotify audience network, they call it, because Megaphone, which we distribute our show through, is owned by Spotify. And so they sell, you'll hear almost every podcast there's a pre-roll. There's 2 or 3 commercials that run in the pre-roll and then during the show and afterwards. And it's a minimal amount of money. I mean, we don't see a ton of money from that. It's a 50-50 split with Spotify, and it's based on a CPM. So if you have a show that's doing, like a Gibby show, for example, when we just got approved for that network, we just got approved for this dynamic ad insertion. And Gibby's show, I mean, you're having thousands and thousands and thousands of downloads every week. Our show is different. We have a very limited audience, a very hardcore audience. So that's where you hear the Lexus ads and the other national advertisers. And it's, you get pennies. You talk about a royalty for a streaming song, you get like 0.01 cent for each time it streams or whatever. We're not that far away from that. But, it generates a few $100 a month.
You know what's weird? I hate to bring up my music past, Robert Charles, y'all.
Yes, Robert Charles.
But I make more money to this day from streaming than I ever made selling records. And I don't know how people are finding my music. It gets out there somehow. It's on Spotify, it's on Amazon, it's on all the streaming services. And every so often I get a quarterly check that boggles my mind. I didn't make that much.
In a good way?
Yeah, I never made that much money selling CDs off the bandstand at a major festival that I make now in royalties from streaming sales.
That's very cool, Bob.
I mean, it's a phenomenon to me, and I get the royalties in different ways. You get them as a songwriter, you get them for plays, you get them blah blah blah. So and then Laible gets some, but it's like the fact that I get any money at all at this stage of my life. My last album was in 2009. It's like it amazes me. So people complain about streaming.
Mailbox money.
I'm thrilled with it, man. It's called residual income, Jack.
Yeah, it's a little extra cash.
Daddy needs new shoes,
There you go. Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of we explaining the inside of the inside of the inside of what we do here, and why not? We're kind of an open book. Sometimes a little bit too open.
Between John and I, we've had 27 careers, so
Oh yeah, exactly. Maybe more. Yeah. But the next segment on the show, obviously, Bob is one of our favorites, both of our favorites, the Lightning Kid.
Absolutely. Can't wait to hear what he has to say here, John. And he brings up, he had a match locally with Bill Wilcox, which is a name I've heard since I worked at the magazines. Do you remember Bill?
No.
Me either. I do remember. I do remember that at the time at PWI, he was considered one of the big up-and-coming stars.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. I can't remember why. And Bill, if you're out there, I can't remember why he was such a talked-about commodity, but he really was. And so it was like...
Well, Lightning Kid, yeah. I mean, he certainly won his way, but I really don't remember Bill Wilcox at all. I wasn't at that show where Sean got hurt. But hey, listen, we're going to hear about it, and we have this wonderful clip of it's not a long one, but we do have Lightning Kid, who we had to get a hold of because we heard that he almost died. So we wanted to clear it up and find out what was going on.
To the phone right now. We're running out of time rapidly here today. And let's get on with the Lightning Kid. Kid, are you there? Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Lightning Kid, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. How you doing?
Hanging in there.
Well, this is you caused a lot of concern this week. I just wanted to touch base with you and bring you to the show. We understand that last week in New Jersey you had a match with, I guess it was Bill Wilcox. Is that his name?
Yeah.
And can you explain to us what happened to you? Of course, for the listeners out there, Lightning Kid is considered one of the best wrestlers in the entire world today. And you gave us quite a scare last week, Kid.
Basically what happened was I was knocked to the outside of the ring, and totally given up hope on the light heavyweight division. That to me, that's their problem. There's a really good that's a really good market to to hit. There's a lot of talented light heavyweights out in the country, let alone the world, and if they don't want to tap into that, that's their problem.
Yep, and I understand you're being scouted pretty heavily right now by organizations in Japan as far as doing some extensive work over there.
Right. If some of the people listening have ever heard of Universal Pro Wrestling, I've been going for them for about a year and a half, and I quit that company in August. And I think that was a pretty good move on my part. And it seems as if New Japan Pro Wrestling is going to bring me in later on in the year, in 1993.
Well, hopefully the year 93 will be a better year for you. Of course, you've gotten a lot of respect from the wrestling fans here. We want to wish you happy holidays, and I'm glad that everything is okay with you, and you'll be back in the ring soon. Lightning Kid, thank you very much for coming on with us today.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Okay, happy holidays.
Take care.
Well, I have to say that what happened there was, the tapes are 45. They're like a 90-minute cassette. And when we brought him on, we were right at the end of that first side A of the cassette. And right when we started the interview, we ran out, and Bruce Jacobs, who was in the control room with the engineer, didn't flip the tape over fast enough, so we didn't really get the full explanation of what happened with Bill Wilcox. And then we had the latter part of that interview. So anyway, kind of disappointed now. And I remember now uploading it for Marsh that it was like, all right, we ran out of tape on side A of the cassette, and then you turn it around, and then it's like towards the latter part of the interview. So anyway, I apologize for that. At least you get to hear his voice 30 years ago.
Yeah, but you know what? I just kind of glanced at some history. He had a really bad injury in that match. It was like, yeah. I don't recall if it was a head injury or a leg injury or something like that, but it was pretty serious.
It was a concussion. Because Laible talked about it a little bit,
right?
And then somewhere else, I think that was the latter part of the Laible thing that we didn't end up playing all the way through. Was that there was Lawler, and I think they get a little bit more into the specific injury. I actually pulled up the video, so I'll put a couple screen caps up. Mm-hmm. He goes to the outside. Yeah, I found it. He goes to the outside. Bill Wilcox gets on the top rope, dives on him, and then from this angle, you just don't see him for a long time till Wilcox jumps out, and you see him like hoist him up and roll him into the ring, and he's just out. And that was a concussion they talked about later.
Wow. So on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Pro Wrestling Spotlight, you'll do your magic when we put this show up for everyone to see, and you'll get a chance to actually see what happened.
Yeah.
I just looked up Bill Wilcox. He wrestled all these huge stars internationally.
Yeah.
I wish I knew more about Bill Wilcox as I'm sitting here. I just can't recall.
Yeah. Well, this will probably be the only time we ever discuss him anyway.
Yeah, it's true. I'm getting all in a bunch over Bill Wilcox.
Yeah, I know. You have a fascination with Bill Wilcox, Bob.
Here's the thing. Usually when we talk about stuff from my era, I can pop it out, and it's pretty good. My memory's pretty good, but this one...
Yeah, I think because he was such a hot topic in the office, too, which piqued your curiosity.
He was a lot of talk in the office. I remember this. Bill Wilcox came to town. Really? It was a big deal.
It was a big deal. So we're getting ready to close it out for Fairly Mo. We have another segment to go. And our good friend, and still a good friend, suffered a major stroke not too long ago, and he's doing okay. Larry from L&S Comix joined us in the studio, and he talks about his experiences with the Lightning Kid. Sean, as he puts him, as he mentions, Sean is a great guy. And then L&S, we talk about the history of L&S Comix with Pro Wrestling Spotlight with Larry there, their content that they sell, the imported wrestling figures, the Superman Died promotion with DC Comics, which really put comics sales through the roof for that particular issue. And then Larry says he hopes Marvel will kill Spider-Man to increase sales too. That's kind of funny. And a lot of wrestling fans had discovered L&S through the Pro Wrestling Spotlight. And they just launched a trade paperback, DC did, of Superman. So anyway, Larry was in there and he was talking about how much of a hard time he was keeping the wrestling figures in stock at L&S during the holiday season. And we have a small clip from Larry from L&S talking about the possibility of doing a price guide for wrestling merchandise. So let's go to that.
And, of course, LJN, you still got some of those original wrestling dolls available.
The collectible business in wrestling is where it's really at. At the moment...
It's in its infancy stages, but I think over the last year or so, it's really picked up.
Yeah, at the moment, the LJNs are very hot. They're on the move. Prices are rising. They're starting to rise very high. The thing about wrestling and all toy collecting is the toys have to be kept in the package.
Right.
So... finding dolls that are kept in the package over the years are very rare. I've been in contact with one of the major price guides, and at this point it looks like we will be working with them on the actual price guide listings for wrestling toys and memorabilia. So the first listing, because none of the toy price guides have it at all, so that if you're looking at them, it's not in there. We will be working on that, hopefully in time for WrestleMania.
That'll be great. Well, give everybody out there the phone number, a way to contact you over at L&S. 516-489-9636, right?
Or 489 X-Men if it's easy. That'll make it short.
Well, Larry, I just wanted to bring you down here today because you've been a tremendous sponsor here at this program, and I wanted to give you a little bit more than just a 60-second plug here today because you've done a lot for this program, and we're looking forward to working with you throughout the year 93 as well.
Sure will, John. As long as the show's on there, we will be sponsoring it.
Music to your ears.
Yeah, and that was always the question mark, as long as the show is going to be on the air,
He's right. It was the same for my magazines as it was for your show in terms of gaining advertising that wasn't wrestling related. So if you went through a PWI issue, you'd see our own magazine back issues and this and that. We'd have ads for this nebulous, pulpy stuff. But one of our regular advertisers was always this big company that sold wrestling belts, masks.
I remember them.
Figurines. Mm-hmm. Or figures. What do they call them?
Action figures.
Action figures. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. Figurines. But anyway. Well, it's better
than calling them dolls, as Larry referred to them recently. On this.
But in any event, it was the same for us as it was for you, and he was right. That market was taken off, and even in my day, which is I left there in 91, 92, or early 93, whatever it was. I forget when I freelanced for them after leaving the company for a while, and then left entirely, but they were always a perennial advertiser in the wrestling magazines, and obviously for you too.
Yeah, and back then you could get a good LJN for about $40, where now you got to pay $500 to $1,000.
If you asked me back then that the wrestling memorabilia industry would become what it has become, I would have laughed at you.
Yeah, it's hotter than ever. It gets hotter. It's hotter than ever. It's the hottest it's ever been in the history of wrestling right now.
Yeah. Now. It's incredible. Crazy. It really is.
But we closed the show out, Bob. We advertised the Farmingdale Lanes and the British Bulldog and Jim the Anvil Neidhart signing on December 26th. And then the show ends with me teasing the possibility of Sid Vicious coming into the studio next week at WNYG. And I have to let everybody give you a spoiler alert. That didn't happen.
Oh, okay.
That didn't happen. No.
You should have left them hanging. They might have tuned in.
Yeah, right. But, then, you falsely advertise, hey, Sid Vicious, and then no Sid Vicious. But we do have a two-parter. We'll have the British Bulldog back for that second part on next week's episode. And there's also Bruno Sammartino coming on. And he'll be talking about a promotion that he'll be doing. And you ever hear of Stromboli?
Sure.
Well, Bruno will be talking about a Stromboli promotion with us on the next episode, so that'll be a lot of fun. And there's a lot more stuff to cover, obviously. That wraps it up for this week. It was a good one.
Yeah.
It's always fun to do this. And, Marsh, we always appreciate everything that you do, and you there behind the curtain giving us the answers to questions that we don't have and finding rare, unique clips. So keep doing what you're doing, my friend.
Marsh, I have to thank you for something. Here's a little funny anecdote for you based on your work. I have my cell phone amongst a bunch of friends, and I'm looking at your placard for last week's show, which had the caricature of me next to the old caricature of John. And people looking over my shoulder at my cell phone and go, why did they give you such a big nose? Why did that? And then I'm looking at it. I said, wait a minute. And it hit me. This hit me late. This shows you how dense I am. The obvious Fred Flintstone to George Jetson parallel in the illustration. And it's brilliant. It hit me so late. So I appreciate
it. Was based off of a comment that John had made to me before. It was, what was his name? Mr. Stokely?
Okay.
What's the name?
Mr. Slate.
Mr. Slate.
Yeah.
Mr. Slate. It's Fred's boss. No. It's based off of Fred's boss.
Mr. Slate was Fred's boss in the Flintstones.
You'll have to show the placard when we produce the show, because it's like, to me, I thought it was a George Jetson parody.
I don't know. It was
one side with the Fred Flintstone-ish looking thing, and I was on the other side. I thought I was looking like, I guess I wasn't.
You would think you were looking like George Jetson? Is that what?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're pretty close. I haven't. I'm looking at both of them. They're very close.
It's the same production company, so
yeah. Yeah.
Bob will call you George Jetson if you like. That's fine with me.
Yeah, we can.
Stocking Coswell Cogs. That's and I'll make up for it that way.
I look like Dino the dinosaur in mine. I think. I don't know.
I always thought it was a Flintstones thing.
Well, that was Mr. Slate was in the Flintstones. Yeah.
All right.
Anyway, let's not confuse. Go see it. It's up there on YouTube. You can see Bob and his cartoon caricature.
Yes. But anyway, it's really cool. And I want to thank you on air because it's he sent it to me for approval and he didn't need my approval. I thought it was really brilliant.
Yeah, I when he showed it to me, I said, you got to show it to Bob, but Bob is cool with it. Run with it,
Oh, I thought it was great.
Yeah.
So I want to let you know.
That's very cool stuff.
You know what? I think that stuff will attract a lot of eyeballs and hopefully earballs or ear something.
Let's hope.
Yeah.
And, we have great content. It'll be a lot more to come. And I do have to make one plug because we did have this two-parter with Davey Boy Smith, the next part next week, obviously. But on the Gibby Show, I have to give a plug to the Gibby Show because this week was a phenomenal podcast episode. And it was also a two-part interview because we talked to the president baseball operations for the Atlanta Braves, Alex Anthopoulos, who was also the GM for many years at the Toronto Blue Jays and a friend of John's, and he had hired John to be a special assignment scout for the Braves. And it's the most inside, fascinating interview between a general manager and his former manager, which was Gibby, that I've ever heard. I mean, there were revelations in that thing. If you're a baseball fan, you're a fan of the Atlanta Braves, because I asked him about how he constructed that team and how he's signing all these young guys to long-term contracts. And we talk about his days with the Toronto Blue Jays. So that's the Gibby Show. Wherever you get your favorite podcast, it's a podcast that I do with John Gibbons each week. And part one of the Alex Anthopoulos interview ran this week. And our numbers are still, because we've had Josh Donaldson and Alec Manoah and Jose Batista and Kevin Pillar and Danny Jansen. And, we're going to start getting the 86 Mets on and some of the other baseball personalities that he's talking to, like the Albert Pujols of the world. And so each week it comes out every Monday, the Gibby Show, wherever you get your favorite baseball podcast. And happy to say that we got Budweiser in as a sponsor. So that is we're giving away stuff. We're giving away Budweiser merchandise packs now each week. We have a segment called Ask Gibby that goes through our Twitter page and also our Gmail account. And each week we pick two questions. Stan Kaplan, who's listening, no, you haven't been selected yet for a question. Keep trying, Stan. But anyway, it's like we're getting hundreds and hundreds of questions each week, and it's hard for me to pick two every week to pick the right two. So anyway, we're having fun with the Gibby Show. It's everywhere. But anyway, this is the Pro Wrestling Spotlight podcast. Bob, Marsh, please let everybody know how they could find you on social media.
Yeah, you can find me at Ref Marsh on Twitter and WrestlingOnTheRocks.com for all of my side gigs and stuff.
And my new handle at Twitter that I'm mad at right now. I won't get into that, but I've changed my handle to the simple Bob Smith PWS, and the PWS stands for Pro Wrestling Spotlight because it makes sense, rather than my old obtuse Twitter handle. So I'm hoping that if anyone wants to talk wrestling or talk the show, you know where we are. How about you, John?
Hey, yeah, I mean, at John Arezzi, Instagram, at John Arezzi, Twitter. But, Bob, I don't know if you've had a chance to go to the Pro Wrestling Spotlight page on Facebook.
I have.
Because you have a lot of birthday greetings there from our listeners.
I will. You know what? I haven't been since yesterday, so I'm going to have to go back and look.
Yes, we posted that picture of me and you at the game, and wish you a happy birthday. But this is on the Facebook page, on the Pro Wrestling Spotlight Facebook page, and a lot of the listeners responded to that. Wish you a happy birthday.
October 27th, and my birthday was the day before that. So
yeah.
And any you fans can go check it out too. Obviously, that stuff stays up there if you want to.
Yes, it is. It's facebook.com/Pro Wrestling Spotlight Podcast and Radio Show.
Very nice,
right, guys.
Your hosts seeing each other live for the first time in 30 frickin' years. It was amazing.
That's right. It was a lot of fun. We'll do it again next year for sure. So anyway, that's going to about wrap up this edition. If you enjoy this show, and if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please give it a 5-star review and leave a nice comment there. That really helps us out. Don't forget to check out the sister podcast, Matt Memories from Madison Square Garden, covering all the shows I covered from the Mecca of all arenas 50 years ago to the day the show takes place. So right now we have all the episodes up there from August of 71 right through October 16th, 1972. And we're getting ready to produce the next episode, which will come out November 27th with Pedro Morales against Ray Stevens. Matt Memories from Madison Square Garden is co-hosted by Tim Poutre, written and researched by Richie Garcia. Thank you again to our co-host Bob Smith and to our producer and creative director, our friend Marsh. And thanks to the patron executive producers for this episode and all episodes, Anthony Pyrus and Joe Holloway, and for all the other patrons for your support helping with the production costs for this show. Until next week, when we relive more history with you, this is John Arezzi for the Pro Wrestling Spotlight.